The night unleashed its fury upon the city with unrelenting force. Rain poured in torrents, a relentless cascade that drowned the streets, while the wind howled, whipping debris through the air like lost spirits caught in a tempest. Javier, a scrawny 13-year-old boy, huddled beneath the overhang of an old, crumbling building, seeking shelter from the biting cold that pierced through his ragged, rain-soaked clothes. The fabric clung to his pale skin, heavy with water, offering no warmth against the storm's assault. Hunger gnawed at his insides, a persistent ache he'd grown accustomed to, a cruel companion in his life on the streets. His eyes squeezed shut, not to sleep but to escape if only for a moment the harsh reality of his existence. Homeless, orphaned, hopeless. Then amidst the storm's roar, a sharp, desperate sound sliced through the night. A scream. Javier jolted upright, his heart pounding against his thin chest. The cry echoed from a nearby alley, a place he knew well, a shadowed corner of the city where danger lurked, especially under the cover of darkness. Every instinct screamed at him to stay put, to avoid trouble, to survive as he always had, alone. But that scream, laced with suffocating desperation, rooted him in place. Something stirred within him, a faint flicker of compassion that the streets hadn't yet extinguished, urging him toward the sound. With cautious steps, Javier entered the alley, its darkness swallowing the faint glow of distant streetlights. Shadows stretched and merged, leaving only the steady patter of rain and a low, pained groan to guide him. There, sprawled on the drenched ground, lay an elderly man, clutching his leg, his face contorted in agony. Javier froze, his mind a battlefield of fear and the inexplicable urge to help. Life on the streets had taught him that kindness was a luxury, a risk often repaid with betrayal or worse. Yet, as the old man lifted his head, his clouded eyes wide with pain and terror, Javier felt an unseen force pull him forward. "Sir, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling, weaker than he'd intended. The man gasped, his words faltering between breaths. I fell, my leg. I think it's broken." Javier knelt beside him, his small hands shaking as he tried to assess the injury, unsure of what to do. "What's your name?" he asked, grasping for anything to keep the man conscious. "Ramon." "Ramon Garcia," the man replied, his eyes shutting tight against the pain. Javier glanced around, panic rising like bile in his throat. The alley was empty, the storm having driven everyone indoors, and he had no means to call for help. I need to find someone," he stammered, starting to rise, but Ramon's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Please, don't leave me. I can't be alone," the old man pleaded, his voice quivering, nearly lost in the rain's din. Javier swallowed hard, the cold and fear tightening around his chest like a vice. He was just a boy, a nobody with nothing, yet here was a stranger pinning all his hope on him. The rain fell mercilessly, as if intent on burying them both beneath its weight. Javier sank back down beside Ramon, his mind racing for a solution. "I don't have any way to call anyone," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. Ramon, though frail, gestured weakly toward his sodden coat. "My phone, in my pocket," he murmured, his hand trembling. Javier fumbled through the wet fabric, his fingers clumsy with cold and nerves, until he found the device. He dialed emergency services, his voice tight with urgency as he spoke. "We're in an alley near San Andres Street. A man's hurt. He needs help fast." As they waited, Javier sat close to Ramon, an odd sensation creeping over him, that somehow this moment was about to alter his life forever. The wind lashed at his face, sending rivulets of rain down his neck, but Ramon's gaze, though pained, offered a warmth Javier had never known. When the distant wail of a siren pierced the storm, relief washed over him. "They're coming," he said, trying to comfort Ramon, who nodded faintly, too exhausted to reply. Paramedics soon arrived, rushing toward them with a stretcher. "What happened here?" one asked, kneeling beside Ramon. "He fell. I think his leg's broken," Javier explained, his voice still shaky. They assessed the injury quickly, their faces grim. "Looks like a hip fracture," one said. As they lifted Ramon onto the stretcher, he cried out, his eyes squeezing shut, but his gratitude shone through as he looked at Javier. Just before the ambulance doors closed, Ramon grabbed a paramedic's arm, his voice faint but insistent. "The boy, let him come with me." Javier stood stunned. No one had ever needed him, wanted him near. The paramedic turned to him. "Do you want to go with him?" Javier glanced back at the dark alley, then at Ramon, whose hopeful eyes held his. "Yes, I will," he replied, stepping into the ambulance. As the vehicle sped through the wet streets, Ramon reached for Javier's hand, his grip weak but firm. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you," he rasped. In the cramped space, amid the siren's wail and the flashing lights, Javier felt an inexplicable bond forming with this man. Ramon's voice broke the silence again. "You must be scared, huh?" The question caught Javier off guard. No one had ever cared how he felt. "I'm more worried about you," he said, staring out the window at the city lights streaking by in a blur. Ramon managed a faint smile. "You're a strong boy, Javier. I've seen a lot in my life, but not many kids have your courage." Javier shrugged, unsure how to respond. He didn't feel brave. Fear and confusion churned within him, but something in Ramon's tone made him want to be strong, at least for that night. The ambulance screeched to a halt at the hospital, its harsh white lights flooding the interior, momentarily blinding Javier. Nurses whisked Ramon away and Javier followed, feeling small and out of place among the bustling staff. Ramon clung to his hand as if the boy's presence anchored him to reality. "Don't leave me now, Javier," he pleaded, fear lacing his words. "I'm not going anywhere," Javier replied, though doubt gnawed at him. When Ramon was taken into an exam room, a nurse asked Javier to wait outside. He sank into a hard plastic chair in the hallway, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. He just closed his eyes when Ramon's voice called out, "Javier, I need to talk to you." He hurried to the doorway, finding Ramon on a stretcher, his expression tense. "What's wrong, Mr. Ramon?" he asked, masking his own unease. "Javier, I don't want you going back to the streets," Ramon said, his voice urgent. "I want you to stay with me. I know it sounds strange, but I feel like fate brought us together tonight." Javier stared, disbelief washing over him. No one had ever cared enough to offer him anything beyond a fleeting glance of pity. "Why would you do that for me?" he asked, his voice cracking. Ramon smiled through his pain. "Because I see something special in you, Javier, something the world shouldn't waste." The hours that followed unfolded in a haze within the hospital's sterile walls. Javier stayed by Ramon's side, his heart a tangle of emotions. Ramon shared his story, a life once filled with purpose, a loving wife named Elena and a son, all lost to a tragic accident years ago. "I buried myself in work trying to fill the void, but it only pushed me further from what mattered," he said, his voice heavy with regret. Javier listened, a pang of recognition stirring within him. He knew loss too, but he'd never imagined someone like Ramon, seemingly refined and accomplished, could harbor a similar sorrow. "I don't have anyone either," Javier confessed, his words barely a whisper. "My parents are gone and I've been on my own since." Ramon squeezed his hand tighter. "I'm sorry, Javier. No child should endure that." Those words pierced him, unearthing feelings he buried deep. Morning brought Pedro, Ramon's lawyer, to the hospital. A middle-aged man with a stern yet kind demeanor, he smiled at Javier. "You must be Javier. Ramon told me about you." Ramon, awakening slowly, looked at Pedro. "I want to change my will, Pedro. I met Javier last night and he saved me. I want to ensure he has a safe place if anything happens to me." Javier's breath caught. "Mr. Ramon, you don't have to do that. I don't want to be a burden," he protested. "You'll never be a burden, Javier," Ramon said warmly. "I want this because you deserve it." Pedro nodded, though cautious. "Ramon, this is legally complex. We'll need social services, maybe temporary custody. It won't be easy." Ramon held Javier's hand, resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes." The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings and procedures. Mrs. Lopez, the social worker, arrived to speak with Javier. She asked about his life on the streets, how he felt about Ramon's offer. "No one's ever wanted to help me like this," he said, his voice trembling. "I want to stay with Mr. Ramon. He's the only one who looked me in the eye and saw more than a street kid." Mrs. Lopez smiled. "There are legal hurdles, but we're here to keep you safe." At last the court date arrived. Dressed in new clothes Ramon had provided, Javier trembled as he entered the courtroom. The judge heard his story, the rainy night, Ramon's kindness, the hope growing within him. After deliberation, the judge ruled, "I believe Javier's best interests are served under Ramon Garcia's guardianship." Tears streamed down Javier's face as he hugged Ramon tightly. In the months that followed, their lives settled into a new rhythm. Javier started school, Ramon, though still recovering, guided him through the transition. One day, Javier hung a drawing on Ramon's wall, two birds soaring together in the vast sky, symbolizing their freedom and newfound family. "This is what we have now," he said, smiling. Ramon nodded, his eyes glistening. "We're a family, Javier." From two lonely souls they had found each other, forging a future brimming with hope, certain that whatever came they'd face it together.